I have a very critical sister. As we know, the teeth.
Well, question. Does it impact microphones and all that?
Oh, okay, all right.
You've got your blur on.
Let's do it.
My first exposure was meeting Jeremy Nowak and the leaders of what was a nascent community development financial institution, the Reinvestment Fund in Philly, and just being totally fascinated, curious, and admiring of what they were trying to do, particularly in organizing money to invest in places like East Camden and North Philly.
I first ran into CDFIs or their predecessors, in my case, community development loan funds, in 1988, right before Thanksgiving, when a friend invited my wife and me over to the house of their friend in Philadelphia, and that friend happened to be Paul Trimble. And Martin started talking about these community development loan funds and how they brought communities together and how they organized capital from nuns and other faith-based investors and from foundations and all the amazing work they were doing. And I thought either he was crazy or he was a prophet. And turned out he was a prophet.
So my journey with the CDFI field really begins when I leave banking 35 years ago, 1989. And I wander from 399 Park to 320 East 43rd Street to the Ford Foundation. 10 blocks, and I find my joy. I walked into the Ford Foundation, which is the seat of the real movement on community development for the whole country.
So I was working for the first time for a national organization where I was trying to understand the landscape of community investment. Organizations, I knew as I started to learn about CDFIs that actually throughout my economic development career, I had been working with CDFIs for at least a decade before, but I didn't realize that they were CDFIs. I remember still that first moment of standing in the back of the room and seeing people connect. And again, the energy, I keep coming back to that word because it stayed with me, that first moment. And I feel it every time, every year for the last 10 years that I've attended an OFN event, particularly the conference.
I thought, one, these people are the smartest people I've ever worked with. And second, they have no idea how relevant they are to the future of policy in this country. They have no idea, and I want to be part of it.
The national conferences, at least in those early days, we all had a commitment to the mission, which was capital for political, economic, and social justice. And so for us, it was an organizing venture. We were all trying to understand the larger political context in which we were organizing money to invest in communities. I remember the board meeting where we discussed it, that our work is fundamentally grounded in performance and production. And therefore, what are the standards that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to? There was this ethic that in the end, if we didn't build high-performing institutions that could grow and get to a scale, that we weren't serving the communities that we had committed ourselves to. I think this second milestone would be the announcement, I can't remember the conference or even where it was, when we announced $1 million investment or grant from Citibank. It would be equity grants in exchange for their agreeing to a set of performance standards and that they would be measured on whether they had met those performance standards or not. First and foremost, I think we understood that raising that first equity grant would allow us collectively to pursue our goal of self-regulation.
The thing that was sort of most catalytic, it was, it takes some explaining, but was the 2003 strategy that OFN came out with that we refer to as Grow, Change, or Die. So Grow, Change, or Die ended up being a strategy, a 25-year strategy. And we looked out well beyond what any of us could know to be true, well beyond what any of us expected to be around to to see the results of in some ways. It was about how what we were doing in our communities could be amplified, leveraged into a collective force. And people were really still not thrilled about the idea that we were going to scale the industry. They felt like it was somehow a criticism of how they had been doing things in the past. I knew that we had missed on something, that we hadn't quite communicated, what we needed to communicate. But again, it was hard for people to imagine doing things differently when, they had worked so hard to just do them well. It was a big lift for people. And then that was why in 2004, my speech was called Grow, Change, or Die. That was why I needed to say to them, look at what you've done. Look at what you've done already. And that's what that speech is about. And I gave very specific examples of how this CDFI and this CDFI were working together, how this CDFI had changed, and part of that was to say it was happening before we said grow, change, or die. You were already doing this. That was my message. You're already doing this. And they knew it had to change. They believed in this change, but it's really hard to make that personal change. It's transformative. It was transformative for the industry. It was transformative for a lot of CDFIs.
It was my privilege and surprise to be at the helm of OFN as the year 2020 dawned. We had just cut a ribbon. We had a beautiful new space. We had just come off of an amazing conference with Bill Clinton. And we start the 2020 year. We had a visit from the head of philanthropy of Google, which we were considering. We had some objectives to grow a private fund for CDFIs. And all of a sudden, the biggest global disaster that any of us have experienced happens. So these early months of the pandemic, we're going to go out on a limb because nobody's here to say what this is going to look like and how we're going to get these loans repaid. But the CDFIs stepped forward boldly. They started lending quickly. But the crisis is at the street level of, how we're going to keep businesses alive. I remember it was such a disaster that the early wave of PPP loans was immediately gobbled up by larger small businesses and left out so many communities. This was both a true tragedy and a political tragedy. It is not what anybody, intended to leave out the strugglers. And so to the rescue comes our little field. And I think we hit an American vein here too, which is that in crisis, people are inspired to do more, to solve things, and to use unusual partners. And we became the unusual little guys who the country needed. I think as a result of this terrible crisis, a more evident and permanent and important partner, worthy of our subsidy, worthy of federal dollars, worthy of the partnership, all those things. So from a tragedy came a very important next stage for CDFIs.
So 6 weeks into my time in OFN, the applications were released for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And naturally, as everyone else across the country, I was assessing along with the team to understand where OFN's position would be. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, I think, was in many respects uniquely positioned for an organization like OFN. An organization with the experience, with the network, with the impact, and the history of that. The last 40 years has really positioned us to take advantage of this moment, to be an implementer, to be a partner to the EPA on having this kind of impact. The framing of the initiative itself and making sure that it wasn't just capital being deployed into communities, but that we're building the infrastructure of the industry so that in perpetuity, that in the future, that there is not an ending of this program and that we're thinking of it simply as a grant, but that we're investing in many respects, seed capital into the industry so that the infrastructure will exist for us to have impact on climate for the future.
I don't think we're going back into the shadows. And I think we will see an economy where the partnerships between major banking institutions and the CDFI layer, and I think of it as kind of a base layer, we need to be in partnership. I don't think this goes away. I think what we've revealed is that there's still a need for somebody to do the hard work of pushing dollars where markets don't make it easy for them to go, or markets make it easy to go in a rapacious, unfair way. I think one of the big future is getting serious about this tranche of institutions called CDFIs that are just going to be part of America's landscape.
This issue of CDFI coverage, how do we serve the places where we're not? Since 2017, I've been working in CDFI Friendly America, trying to figure out the answer to that question, what we now would call CDFI deserts. There are 1,300 places out of 4,300 places in this country with more than 10,000 people who are that are CDFI deserts. So there's a significant amount of this country that doesn't have access to CDFIs anywhere close to what it needs. I think that's a driving strategic factor for the CDFI industry going forth. And I hope that folks, in a lot of ways, and some people are doing this, will find new ways to expand expand service across geography.
We're standing at this moment where a couple of factors are coming together, where the impact of our work, the elevation of our narrative, and frankly, the resources that are coming in are perhaps unimaginable for where we were 40 years ago. And so how we take advantage of this moment to make sure that we're thinking in the biggest of ways that we can have impact in community is important. Right now, our charge is to not only think big, but to act bigger, because we know that we have this moment where we're experiencing some great tailwinds.